this is our presentation on George Washington and the leadership characteristics that he emphasized.
So George Washington was born in Virginia. He's the son of Augustine Washington, who was a tobacco planting slave owner. And they had property in different areas in Virginia, specifically Fredericksburg, near the Potomac River, and in Mount Vernon. And he later acquired all the land and property once his half-brother died and after his dad died. So early on, there's tons of stories on George Washington and how he was such a great leader and how his character from a young age kind of developed him into the great president we know him as. And by the age of 16, he created this thing called the 110 Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in the Company Conversation. And basically these are just like a ton of different ways that you can go about your day or kind of conduct yourself to make others' lives easier, including your own. Kind of like simple things like minding your own business, being respectful to others, just a whole list, 110 things that you can conduct yourself. And he valued honesty and hard work at an early age, living on a tobacco plantation. Obviously, there was a lot of work to be done outside of the slaves and whatnot, like managing them, making sure everything was going well. And then there was a story of him chopping down his dad's favorite cherry tree that he valued a lot, and his dad looked at him in the eye and asked him, did he chop it down? And George Washington was honest about the situation and just told his dad up front. And his dad didn't punish him because he was honest about it up front. So he just valued those two things early on.
Okay, so this is the imprint of his character. Washington was careful in the way he went about his life. He always made sure that he was representing what the American dream was. So as an example, whenever he was the first elected president, he made sure that they were very specific about the way that they addressed the president. It was Mr. President, and he never wanted to be treated like royalty. Another thing is he initially declined to have a salary, but he later on decided that he would take the salary after the other elected officials told him that they didn't want people to think that public service was just for the elite. He also refused a third term, and this led to be followed by the rest of the presidents, as they all left after 2 terms, and this was for everyone except for Franklin D. Roosevelt. And Washington's behavior set a precedent for how other presidents should act. Alright, Washington's greatest flaw. So it's constantly held against George Washington that he was a slave owner. He came about his slaves by whenever his father passed, he inherited them, and he also purchased slaves during his life. But by 1786, Washington wrote a letter to his friend, and in this letter he talked about how there was a better way to deal with the abolition of slavery and how they needed to look for a legislative way to do it, because if he pushed for it himself, it would look more like a dictatorship in terms of how he ended it. And he also wrote to another friend that he never wanted to purchase another slave during his life. So as you can see, he didn't turn away from supporting slavery, but he still did own slaves. And so,
a leader in winter. Those who knew Washington testify that he was a genuine human being with real human imperfections, but also with a very deep core of character. Washington was known to think of his own death. He wanted to live a life of honor. He was known to talk about he always thought about his death, and that he wanted people, when they look back on his life, just to be affected by it. And it was important to him that he would leave a positive legacy when he died. This shows what type of person he was and the leader he was. He focused his life on the effect it would have on people. He wanted to make a difference. Leadership lessons from the father of our country. Character determines our leadership. A few little points that came out of the reading were it's not too late to start building character now. lead by example, remain humble, take time to reflect, obey your conscience in all things. When your conscience whispers, listen, it's your character speaking.
So for our first discussion question, what type of legacy does a good leader leave? And then Brendan.
I think a good leader leaves a legacy that they lead by example, and they go out and they show people how to act. It's not just word of mouth.
That's good. And then our second discussion question, has there been a teammate or leader whose character has set an expectation for you in your life?
I think my coach, Coach McKay's leadership has been really good because he's really talked to me a lot about being an island sometimes and being able to go out and be different and not necessarily be in the world, but be of the world and still be able to be different